Welcome to Midlife Women Entrepreneurs, where you'll find real stories, practical strategies, and the mindset shifts you need for entrepreneurship. If you've ever felt like midlife was too late to launch a business, write a book, or chase a dream, think again. I'm Lynette Turner, your host, and I'm bringing you inspiring conversations and practical tips to help nudge you forward and keep growing in midlife. So let's jump in. All right. Well, I have Marla Miller here on Midlife Women Entrepreneur, and I know for a fact Marla is a subscriber to my YouTube channel and an awesome support of my podcast. And when we got on our pre-call together, I thought, oh my God, this woman has a great story. So thank you, first of all, for supporting the podcast, Marla, and thank you for reaching out. I love your story, and I cannot wait to dive into it. Before we get started, I'm going to hand the floor over to you. Give yourself a bit of an introduction, and we'll take it from there.
Wonderful. First of all, Annette, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Yes, I've been a subscriber because I've been looking for podcasts that focus on that passage in time called middle age or midlife. And yours was the first one that popped up when I Googled it months ago. I am, by profession, a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I was in the clinical area in mental health for almost 25 years. I had while I was having my children, but I was always a writer. I'm an academic nurse. I've written in, academic journals, and I have quite an imagination. And so I just started branching out when the kids were little and snagged a freelance writing job. And really, it kind of segued me into my second career. Although I should say third career, because when you've had 3 children and you're raising them, that's a career. And so I didn't really know where my freelance writing career was going to go. And I've been kind of delighted that it has taken the path that it has taken. I've written a couple of novels, and Sweet Spot Now and Then is the one that really zooms in on midlife. So this is a novel that I published in March of 2025. Shin McCauley were my publishers. They're from London and New York. And it is a year in the life of a woman who has radically changed her life. And actually becoming a writer kind of jump-started it. And this is the back cover, and it's set in 1999. It's just a year. It's a really fast read. In fact, it's a really good beach read, in my opinion. And so let me just read the first paragraph. Call it midlife madness or a midlife crisis, but Sweet Spot Now and Then chronicles one pivotal year in the life of Darlene Robinson, a woman grappling with hot flashes and the weight of being raised as a God-fearing good girl. She followed the rules until she couldn't anymore. And our story begins with Darlene in present day.
Right.
She's beyond midlife now. And that's what I wanted to zoom in on, if it's okay with you, Lynette, because there's so much good information today about the midlife passage. When I was entering midlife in the early 2000s, there was very little. We didn't talk about menopause. We didn't talk about perimenopause. We just were keeping our fingers crossed that we were going to be able to get through this passage okay. Those of us who did, in my opinion, and again, this comes from my experience as a psych nurse for so many years, midlife is tough. It's tough for all of us, men and women. People who get through midlife stronger and not weaker are people who have had good support systems. And unfortunately, my protagonist, Darlene, did not. She and her husband had been married for like 28 years. They got married right out of high school. She's uneducated, but she was a dreamer. She was always a dreamer. And once she hits midlife, she appreciates that some of the things in her life just aren't going well, and she's very unhappy. And she's got 2 great kids. Her husband is not a horrible man. And that's one of the other points that I want to make about the midlife passage. For couples who have had a decent relationship, perhaps started out, really strong in love, each one of them is going to go through midlife in their own way. They're not going to do it in tandem with each other. The trick is doing it and respecting each other as you're making those changes. Those couples, in my humble, get through it and are intact at the end of it so that they can go on and enjoy their later life, which I'm in now. Those who didn't have that experience of having a solid relationship, given that they were married, not everyone is married in midlife, but those who are married, if they didn't have a solid relationship, what happens is that fear settles in. You see your youth in your rearview mirror and you don't know what's ahead. And I'm here to tell you, now that I'm through it and have been through it, good stuff. There's good stuff that happens. You're not always afraid. You're not always concerned about, oh my God, am I going to be able to love again? Am I destroying my family by breaking that? No, it's a crisis. And at the end of crises that we have in our lives, two outcomes. There's only two outcomes to crisis. At the end of it, first of all, it's time limited, about 2 years, according to theory. At the end of it, you're either stronger or you're weaker. You are not the same. And my protagonist in Sweet Spot, eventually ends up stronger. Does she know that when this story ends? No, she doesn't. She learns that by living and by making the choices that she made when she was in her crisis. And so the now sections of Sweet Spot Now and Then offer her perspective as a very successful writer. Again, this is fantasy. Very successful writer who has had this draft of a novel in her hard drive and decides to bring it out, dust it off, and give it to her literary agent, who now, today, has decided that, yeah, you know what? This is a story that will resonate with a lot of people. And so that's why I have the now and the then sections of Sweet Spot Now and Then. In the then section, she's living through it, 46 chapters of that happened over. I've got it, the chapters divided into seasons. And the now section, I slot them in, not a lot, to give readers perhaps some insight that you gain as you age. Aging isn't all about, rotting and losing your energy or losing your desires or losing your ideas. Aging can be a really lovely thing. And sure, at the end of it, does it mean that we're closer? Yeah, we are. But nobody lives forever.
Well, let's back up. Okay, so you have this book, The Sweet Spot, and you call it fantasy. First of all,
Fantasy romance.
Fantasy romance. Why do you call it fantasy romance?
Well, actually, my publisher called it that. I just called it, for me, it's a coming of age story, except coming of age stories usually happens in between teenagehood and young 20s. However, a lot of women, especially women who marry young and take on supportive roles to their husbands, they don't come of age until midlife. And so for me, this is a midlife story because all the dreams that she had as a kid, she shelved to support her husband and have their children. But those dreams wouldn't die in midlife because of certain circumstances. She decides to invest in herself, and investing in herself for me is coming of age. However, so let me just one more thing. In the now sections, it's all made up. So people think, oh, Marla must have, I open the book with, she becomes this incredibly successful author of gardening books. It's a series and it's picked up by TV, et cetera, et cetera. She's shocked because she self-published it. And through self-publishing, she got so many sales back in the early 2000s that a literary agent knocked on her door. This happened all the time back then. All the time. And so that's all rooted in reality. And so I decided to play with it. I thought, what would it be like if a woman like Darlene, is faced with this incredible success that also is very financially rewarding to her? She picks her novel back up that she wrote years before. How does it resonate for her today? Now that she's successful.
Exactly. Like there's so much there in terms of even just the quantum timeline. When I think about quantum jumping and quantum leaping, like the fact that you or she wrote this book, left it sitting in the drawer and then picked it up and then intertwined her now. So that was then, this is what was happening in her 40s. It was over a year period, as you say. And then as she's older, she's now interspersing that feeling, I think, of like your future self, right? So I think there's lots that you can glean from that, reading that book, even though it is a fiction book. And that's actually one thing I do want to talk about is that what themes, and if any, of your own life are woven into the Sweet Spot?
Certainly my desire to be a published author, my desire to live the kind of life that I own. That's my life, where I call the shots. And again, all of this would have been very different had Darlene had a happy marriage or had I had a happy marriage? I got my lead from Nora Ephron. She wrote Heartburn in 1983. And it was a memoir that she disguised as fiction, but it was really the story of the breakup of her marriage. And I read that book many, many times. So the autobiographical base in Heartburn is, similar to the autobiographical base in Sweet Spot. In the late 90s, I knew that my marriage, which was, 20 some years by then, I knew that it probably wasn't going to last. And if it was going to last, I probably wasn't going to be very happy in it. And those are all personal reasons that I don't divulge with the world because I'm not one of those. Although, God, a lot of people are now. People just get on and tell all their life story. But I tell enough in Sweet Spot. I came at that juncture in my life where my kids were going to college. And I knew that if I wanted to try another path, that then was the time to do it. And so I did. I think what happens with women statistically is that, at least for boomers, you're not a boomer, I'm a boomer. Our divorce rate at 25 years of marriage just absolutely spiked. And I mean spiked. Because we were kind of we were the boomers. It was the 90s. We were like, it was all disposable. Like, if I don't like it, if it isn't feeling good, I want to change it. And we did that liberally, and perhaps too liberally. I don't think your generation is as quick to get divorced as my generation was.
Right.
And so I decided to do that. And, I had become a writer. It was my second career. I had lots of fodder from my experience as a writer to put into my novels. Most of my fiction is really based on a reality of my time, because I don't believe, Lynette, that you can write fiction that has any resonance for the public unless it's rooted in some reality that you can relate to.
I agree.
I
do agree with that. So let me ask you this. If your book, The Sweet Spot, could actually sitting on somebody's nightstand and change one thing for a woman in midlife, what would you want that to be?
That's a great question. Think before you act. Think very carefully.
So Marla, let's move over to your coaching and your community work.
Sure.
So you've helped a lot of people, especially, even writers in their 70s, publish their first books.
Oh, yeah.
So talk a little bit about that. And then I want to know, what do you think midlife unlocks creatively that earlier life stages don't? Like, why is it a good time? Why is midlife a good time for somebody to write a novel?
Whether you're going to write a novel or a memoir or your autobiography, midlife is a time when people start hearing, that other clock. When we're young women, we hear the biological clock ticking if we want to have children. In midlife, we hear life's clock. We don't have forever. In midlife, you've still got so much ahead of you. And I think that by the time we hit midlife, we've dealt with enough issues that we're braver. People who are thinking of leaving long-term marriages that are unsatisfying to them have to be brave, because I think it's easier to stay. And I know lots of people who do. So you have to be brave, and you have to have a plan. You have to know, if I'm leaving this, what am I going to?
Right. But so what is it? What does midlife actually unlock? So you're saying these experiences, is that what you're implying there?
I think it unlocks your bravery. I think you become less fearful as you get older.
Right. Okay.
Or at least that was always it wasn't a defined goal of mine, but it just happens. Like, I'm so much braver now than I ever was.
Yeah.
And I'm a 70-something-year-old woman. I'm braver. I'm just braver. Maybe it's because of the experiences that I put myself in. I haven't hid. I haven't stood behind anything. I've been very upfront. And over time, I kind of think I'm doing pretty well. And I'm not sure that I would have said that in midlife. In midlife, I think that I was more concerned about I didn't do this and I didn't do this and my kids didn't do this. Now I'm going, you know what? Not bad, Marla. Not bad at all.
You're saying braver. You're a lot braver. What do you think the common fears are that women will bring into your workshops? Like, is there sort of a theme that you see?
I think that it really depends on the writer, and it also depends on what they're working on. I teach workshops online and also in real time. I teach at Saddleback College. I teach at the Southern California Writers Conference, the Santa Barbara Writers Conference, and then through the city of Newport Beach. and I teach autobiography and memoir. And it's mostly to people who come into my workshops are late 50s, early 60s. However, I'm working with a client now who's 86, and she's getting ready to publish an incredible story. She had polio when she was 8 years old, and she's a brilliant writer. She's just a beautiful writer. And I'll tell you what, I wish I had her talent, and she's got me by several years. And so it just depends on the person. I had a client from the Santa Barbara Writers Conference who just had her first book signing yesterday in Santa Barbara, and she had never written, but she worked in Hollywood and came to my workshop last year in Santa Barbara, and we clicked. I loved the voice of what she was working on, and she hired me. And I'll be darned if that girl isn't, her autobiography is flying off the shelves. She had a book signing up at a very big bookstore in Santa Barbara, and it was packed with people. She's 74 years old. First book. She said she just wanted to tell her story. It was important for her to tell her story. And it's quite a story. And of course, it comes when I'm talking.
I love that she's doing that. And it makes me think about legacy. So are you thinking about that? Like what role does legacy actually play in your work, especially with these senior writers? Why does that matter more than ever? Like everybody, I think it's important that everybody tells their story, and often people will go to the grave and they will take with them so much.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So what role does legacy play for you?
I decided to publish this novel, get this novel published, even though it was written, a couple decades ago. And I'm bringing another book out in print that I only had in ebook form because, as I've said to many people, I don't want to die with my work in my hard drive. I just don't want to. I worked hard on it. So I want it out there. I want it on bookshelves, if only mine. I want it out there. So yeah, I don't know that it's my legacy per se as my work. I work hard. And when you're a writer, it's really hard to get published and read. Even though we have all these mediums now for it, getting read is an entirely different story. Anyone can publish. And so I don't want to go to my great beyond with my long works of fiction.
Exactly. And
going to the great beyond
their work.
Yeah. I don't want to do that.
Exactly.
And most people don't. When they come into my workshop, a major concern for who are over 60 is they don't want to hurt their family. Many of them say,
with the truth that they're going to say, like they don't want to hurt their family because they're going to write this memoir that's going to sort of open up a few Pandora boxes.
Yeah. Okay. And they don't, or they want to do that delicately. And I'm a good person to do that with because I think because of my psych background, I'm very careful with writers. I don't want writers to put anything on the page that they are not comfortable with. And sometimes they don't even know that they're not comfortable until they read it in my workshop, because we read all of everything that people write. And they'll go, that was just a little too, or I'll say to them, are you sure you want to go down that road? Because a lot of, or many writers write revenge fiction. Yeah. Oh yeah. Lots. And, I'm going to get back at them if it's the last thing I do. I'm not interested in that. So I don't work with those writers. God bless them. They can go ahead and do that. I just don't want to do that with them.
So I have two questions for you.
Yeah.
The first question is, what does it mean to you to really be seen in this stage of life as a writer, a woman, a leader?
Well, my biggest piece of advice is be seen. Don't hide. Use your voice. If you want to be seen, then you have to use your voice. And at my age, I'll just give you some of the experiences that I've had, Lynette, in social media, which I've been on since 2007. I'm really out there. And again, that's not as usual for my age group, but there's a lot of us out here. In fact, I'm getting ready to not launch a podcast yet, but I'm going to be doing a podcast on older women. Here's what you'll be up against. You'll be up against young, mean people saying, oh, you old lady, disappear, or variations of that. I get it consistently. Or, you're too old to be this stupid. I get that. And, it's like sticks and stones. If that's all you got, then, give it to me, because it's just going to roll off me. And I learned this or I didn't learn it, but I got reinforced by, I don't know if you listen to the podcast, Lynette, Wiser Than Me, by Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking, I didn't know that was the name of it. When you were saying that, I was thinking about it. I wondered if it was still
phenomenal pod. She's in her, I think she just ended the third season. At the end of each podcast, she talks to her mother who's in her 90s. She does a Zoom with her. And her last line of every segment is, if you know an old lady, listen up. And I have to tell you, there's some advantage to having this hair color. If your mind hasn't gone south and you're a critical thinker in any way, shape, or form, this is a good time in life. And it's why, older people are labeled as wise. Not that we all are, but I sure am wiser than I was. And so my friend and I, who's in the entertainment industry, we said, you know what, we should launch our own podcast, not of famous people, but of everyday older people. Because if we want to be seen, we have to talk. We just do. Yeah. We have to talk.
Exactly.
And we have to be willing to handle the pushback that we get.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I thought that was great. And but being seen can be felt as a little intimidating, especially in midlife. Women aren't feeling the same and all that. But I agree. And even sometimes when we sit down and we sit with, somebody who's older than us, I don't know if we remember that they hold a lot of the keys to opening doors and doing things a little bit differently. And I think that we need to, like you said, just kind of give those people some grace and listen, because I think there's a lot to be said. But I know the younger generation is, I want to figure this out on my own and I'll do it myself. But I do agree that if everybody has a story in them, especially as we get older, we've got these life experiences to share.
Well, we are an ageist society. Just are. Mm-hmm. And so, if you're going to be out here, you just have to understand that. And you're not going to change it. I don't have any fantasies that I'm going to change it, but I'm going to push back against it just by being present.
Exactly. Marla, if somebody wanted to work with you, where would they find you? What would be their first step?
They can go to my website, marlamiller.com. Or they can email me at marketingthemuse@gmail.com, or they can just marketingthemuse, MUSE, all one word, @gmail.com, or just Google Marla Miller and just Google it and you'll see because I'm kind of out there. So it's pretty easy to get a hold of me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Threads.
Exactly. And I did do that when I first did the pre-call. You are right. You do come up. And so you're Newport Beach, Marla Miller. Yeah. So Marla, I think you've got a really good little niche going on too, where you're helping specific individuals with their books, their memoirs, their fiction, whatever, to really sort of leave this legacy and use their voice, tell their story so that it doesn't go with them to the grave, really.
I established my workshops for the older set was that I come from this very colorful family on the south side of Chicago who are all immigrants from Italy, and incredible stories. Nobody took notes. Nobody, not even me.
I know.
And so I've got a nephew now who's in your age group, who's now become our historian. And oh my gosh, the stuff that he's uncovered. I just wish that I knew. I mean, I did talk to some of my aunts and uncles back then, but not enough. And so that really launched me. I didn't do it, so I'm going to encourage you all to do it. If you've got the writing bug. Not everyone does.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it doesn't have to always be a book either. Like, even if you wanted to start some Substack or whatever publishing platforms out there right now to start spreading the word, doing a little bit of blogging, because I think that gets it out there. Marla, much grace, much gratitude for joining me today. Thank you so much for supporting me. And I'm definitely looking forward to getting this published. And we will be watching you for sure.
Thank you so much. And you know that I'll be sharing in every platform that I can. And I enjoy you on YouTube. I really do. Whenever I go over there, I go hang out with you for at least a little while. Yeah, no, you're doing, this is
that, a virtual.
It's a good, you've got a good podcast going, and women and men today are much more willing to talk about this midlife passage than they were back in the day. And so that's a good thing. Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. Yeah. Thank you, Marla. Great. Hey, it's Lynette. Thanks for listening today. Please like and subscribe. And if there's somebody out there that you think could benefit from the episode, give it a share. Midlife is your time, so go get it.